Spirits of Christmas, Tessa Lamar Novels, Volume 2, written by Kathryn M. Hearst, narrated by Holly Adams. Chapter 1. The pressure in my chest started the day after Halloween. Nothing major, just a sense of dread that accompanied the holiday season. It happened every fall, though it seemed to start earlier and earlier each year. I navigated my cart through the seasonal aisle, expecting discounted candy and mismatched costume pieces. Instead, I found candy canes and marshmallow Santas. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with Christmas in and of itself, but this time of year meant family obligations. While I don't think I'm the only person on the planet with a screwed-up family, I know for certain I've cornered the market on crazy mothers. My name is Tessa, or Tessa Marie when I've done something foolish. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, though not currently practicing. My career came to a crashing halt when the fact that I'm a psychic medium made national news. These days, the only clients I see are victims of violent crimes at the Orange County Police Department, or members of the local Cherokee tribe coming for a spell or potion at the medicine shop. Working 2 jobs is stressful, and my coping mechanism of choice is chocolate. I turn the corner and hit pay dirt, an end cap of leftover, semi-melted, and mostly damaged bags of Halloween candy. I tossed 3 into my cart and glanced at my watch. I'd left the house with a short shopping list over an hour ago. Less than half the items were crossed off, but my buggy was almost full. My phone rang, and I cringed. My great-grandmother had a way of calling the moment I did something naughty. "Hi, Gram. Tessa, are you still at the Walmart?" "Yes, ma'am." "Could you pick up 2 bottles of my fiber mix? It's on BOGO this week. Oh, and 2 boxes of tea bags." She paused to speak to someone in the room. "You might want to get some more ribs and stop for a bottle of whiskey on the way home." "We have 2 racks thawing." "Are we having company?" I held my breath, praying she hadn't invited anyone awful to dinner. "Darlene and her new beau stopped by. Hurry home, and don't you dare buy Halloween candy." She laughed and disconnected. Grandma hadn't invited someone awful to dinner. She'd invited the queen of awful, my mother. I didn't worry about the latest in Darlene's Flavor of the Month Club. The new boyfriend wouldn't be around long enough for me to remember his name. I added another bag of candy to the cart, and my phone rang again. "Hello?"
"Tessa, where are you? I have 5 of the elders' wives waiting to see you."
Bryson spoke in a hushed tone. "I'm at Walmart. Can you help them?" I had to prepare myself for dinner, take a couple of shots, and chase them with a pound of chocolate. The last thing I wanted to do was rush back to the medicine shop to make love charms.
"They asked to see you,"
Bryson whispered.
"Hurry. I don't like the way Mrs. Matthews is looking at me."
The playfulness in his voice curled my toes. I was pretty sure I was in love with him, but we'd decided to take things slow. However, the lack of toe-curling activities did nothing to relieve my stress. I added another bag of candy to the cart. "I'm only half done with my list."
"If I'm there in 5 to finish the shopping, can you come here and take care of the women?"
"That'll work." I slid my phone into my purse and frowned at the candy. He wouldn't judge me. However, standing next to his toned body would take the enjoyment out of hoarding sweets. The man ate like a machine and rarely touched processed sugar. He'd also given up coffee. 2 strikes against him in my book. We'd worked together as medicine man and woman for the local members of the Cherokee tribe since Charlie, my grandfather, passed away. We were also quasi-engaged, but our relationship was complicated. I'd rounded the corner to the health and beauty department when the phone rang again. "Hi, Aaron."
Tessa, we have a case. Can you meet me in Winter Park in an hour?
I stopped in the middle of the aisle and hung my head. I considered Aaron one of my best friends, but I didn't have time for police work today. "I'm at the store. What kind of case is it?"
Suicide from the sound of it. The deceased's partner found him hanging from a tree in the backyard.
Aaron's voice lacked its usual humor. He'd either had a late night or a rough day, maybe both. "Sure. Text me the address. What's the victim's name?" I had no idea what I'd do with the room full of people waiting for me at the medicine shop, but skipping out on dinner with Darlene made me happy. Plus, working the case would give me the opportunity to check up on Aaron. I hadn't seen him in over a week.
Thanks, Tessa. You're a doll. Partridge. The deceased's name is Partridge.
I glanced around to make sure no one was watching before I loaded 2 containers of maize fiber mix into the cart. "What kind of tree was it?"
Orange tree.
"Why?" It was probably a sin to laugh at the dead, but I couldn't help it. "We have a partridge in an orange tree." Aaron groaned.
I'll send the address. Try to hurry.
"No problem." I continued to push the cart up and down the aisles, adding items as I went. I knew Bryson stood behind me before I laid eyes on him. Because of our weird metaphysical connection, his hand on my shoulder woke my magic, and his warmth made me smile. He leaned his 6'3" frame in to inspect the contents of the buggy and shook his head. To his credit, he didn't comment on my stash of individually wrapped hip expanders. I turned and faced him. "When did it become okay to start the holiday season on the 1st of November?"
I love Christmas.
Bryson grinned as he moved his hand to the small of my back. Dimples formed from the corners of his mouth to his cheekbones, causing a woman in our aisle to swoon. Full-blooded Native American and ridiculously sexy, he received no shortage of female adoration. As much as I wanted to grouse about the nightmare to come, the twinkle in his eye made me bite my tongue. Of course he loves Christmas. He's a morning person, after all. Morning people have a certain outlook on life that night owls don't. I raised on tiptoe to kiss his cheek and handed him the list. "May needs 2 bottles of whiskey. Can you stop by the liquor store?"
Will do.
He slid his arm around my waist and brushed his lips across mine.
Any reason she needs extra?
"Darlene's bringing a new man to dinner." I lingered in his embrace, enjoying the unexpected public affection. "You're awful friendly for the middle of Walmart."
I'm happy to see you.
Bryson took a step back, but kept his hand on my waist. "Are you? Or does this have something to do with me bailing you out of a house full of women?" A lady beside us choked back laughter, staring at Bryson as if she had nothing else to do except wait for his reply. He chuckled.
Both.
"You owe me one." I slung my purse over my shoulder. "Grocery shopping is my only me time."
You can collect later.
His flirting left me tongue-tied and blushing. Bryson didn't show this side of himself often. He gave me a peck on the cheek.
You better hurry. Those women looked desperate.
If one more person told me to hurry, I'd curl into a ball and refuse to move. I have to meet Aaron at 3 o'clock. We have a case. Bryson frowned as he pushed my hair behind my ear, the gentle touch igniting sparks that warmed me.
Tell them to focus on their problem. Do a chant with them. Use some generic herbs or totems and send them home. I'm pretty sure they're all looking for something to get their husband's attention. Nothing too urgent.
I'd like a date and some attention. I procrastinated, but I couldn't resist a few minutes of alone time with him, even if we were standing in the middle of the store.
I'll take you out tonight.
He winked and pushed the cart down the aisle. Chapter 2. After my grandfather passed away, Bryson and I set up shop at Charlie and Aunt Dottie's place. Everything in the house looked different, which made it easier to walk inside, but reminded me how much my life had changed. I craved the comfort of familiarity. I pushed my grief to the back of my mind and told myself this would always be Charlie's house, no matter how many times we changed the furniture. I walked into the living room that we used as a waiting room and into a crowd of anxious women. The chatter stopped, and all eyes turned to me with a mixture of respect, fear, and hope. The air stilled in my lungs at the intensity of their stares. I hadn't grown accustomed to the blind trust most of the tribe put in my and Bryson's magical abilities. We were called on to heal all manner of physical, mental, financial, and relational problems. It was a hell of a burden, and my shoulders slumped from the weight of it. One look at their faces, and I knew Bryson had hit the nail on the head. The ladies had asked to see me for relationship issues. I cleared my throat. Sorry to keep you waiting. Do any of you need privacy to discuss your needs, or have you shared amongst yourselves? 3 blushed, 2 laughed, and the last wrung her hands. In my former life as a mental health counselor, I wouldn't have dreamed of breaking confidentiality or putting a client on the spot. Thankfully, HIPAA didn't apply to mystical arts, and I was in a hurry to get to a murder investigation. Is there anyone who isn't here for help with a problem in their romantic relationships, or lack thereof? When no one spoke, I went around the room, pulling the heavy curtains over the windows, and locked the front door, all while muffling a chuckle. I'd never get used to insinuating myself into other people's love lives. I could barely handle my own. We're going to do something different today. Mrs. Matthews raised her hand. Miss Tessa, no offense, but are you going to do magic on all of us at the same time? Here? We're going to draw on the collective energies of the female essence as a group. Hoping that they didn't notice I made it up as I went, I smiled and walked to the center of the room. Stand, please, and hold hands. The ladies cast shy glances at me and at each other as they formed a circle. In grad school, I'd learned about waning desire in older women, as well as the causes. This group needed a reminder of their feminine power. More so, they needed a shot of confidence. Hachila, I whispered the word for fire, which happened to be my birth mother's name. Nothing happened. Ladies, please repeat after me. Achila, Achila, Achila. Mrs. Matthews yelped when the candles in the room lit. The other women turned to me with wide eyes. I had their attention. I stomped out a rhythm and began with an invocation. O moon, look down upon the would-be lovers, guide their feet to dance and their bodies to love. Black spider, weave your web around them, bind and tangle them so their affections can never flee. The women followed my lead, swaying and stomping. I chanted an old love spell I remembered from Charlie's spell book. I take your kiss and return it. I take your body and worship it. I take your heart and protect it. The women repeated each phrase as they circled the living room. We are strong! Sweat broke out on my forehead, and I shrugged out of my cardigan. I closed my eyes and danced around the circle as the women repeated my words. We are beautiful. We are powerful. We are desirable. The energy in the room brought a smile to my face. Yes, this is exactly what the ladies need. I soared on the high of knowing I had tapped into their psyches and provided some healing. We are deserving of love. We are sensual, sexual beings. Sexual beings, the women called out to me. I stepped on something soft and opened my eyes to find Mrs. Matthews' blouse on the floor. Slowing the rhythm of my feet, I spun in a slow circle. It took my brain a few minutes to catch up to my eyes. The women, in various states of undress, continued to dance. "Thank you for your blessings, Great Mother." I stilled in the center of the circle and whispered the spell to extinguish the candles. However, the flames didn't respond. They continued to move along with the women. My spirit animal, the firebird, stirred inside me, heating my skin as she fought to burst from my body and join the party. It hit me. The energy in the room wasn't only feminine, but sexual. So much so that my breasts felt heavy and the ache between my thighs left me wanting. I hadn't managed an orgasm since the day Charlie died, not because of grief or guilt, but out of a fear of losing control and unleashing my flames. The front door opened, and Bryson stood stock still with his keys in his hand and his jaw on the floor. The color drained from his tanned face as he turned to go, stopped, looked back, and left the house. Thankfully, the ladies didn't notice him, or he might not have made it out with his virtue intact. I clapped my hands together 3 times. "Ladies, we're finished." "Ladies!" One by one, they came out of their trance-like states. Their serene expressions morphed into confusion and embarrassment. No one spoke as they redressed. The change in noise level left my ears ringing. Something had happened in that circle. Though I had no idea what I'd unleashed, I felt the effects spiritually and physically. I opened the door to find Bryson sitting on the porch swing with a curious look on his face. "Hey, we're finished. I have to go." He crooked his finger and beckoned me to come. I took a step forward, not trusting myself to go any closer. The corner of his mouth turned up in a grin, but his eyes held a dark look that sent tingles through my already sparking nerves. The spell's sexual energy had claimed another victim.
What did you do in there?
My eyes followed the movement of his hand as he adjusted himself through his jeans. "I'm not sure." He shook his head and headed for the steps.
"I'm not going in until everyone leaves."
"That's probably wise." I caught his arm and stepped closer. "I'll call Aaron and tell him I'll be late."
"Tessa."
His lips brushed my earlobe before he pulled back.
"We can't have sex until you get control of your magic."
My spirit animal happened to be a firebird. When I got hot and bothered, so did she, but her idea of hot involved actual fire. "Backyard?"
"We agreed there's no need to rush things."
He sighed. I grabbed his hips and pulled him closer. "I'm tired of waiting, aren't you?"
"I'm willing to wait as long as it takes. Besides, you have a suicide investigation, a grieving family, and dinner with Darlene to deal with."
I couldn't argue with his logic. The timing stunk, but he'd turned me down several times over the previous weeks. The rejection stung. We spent a considerable amount of time together during office hours and after, but I needed more from him than time. All right. No sex."
"Clear the house before you go."
Bryson chuckled as he released me. Chapter 3. Until a few months ago, I could count the number of times I had arrived late for work on one hand. Nowadays, I counted myself lucky if I made it to the bathroom on time. I parked alongside 2 patrol cars and hurried to the house. I'd spent enough time on violent crime scenes to know the drill. Credentials out, eyes open, go only where clear, and find Aaron as quickly as possible. I walked inside and paused. The living room belonged on the cover of an interior decor magazine. Dark wood floors contrasted with white couches. Large black and white paintings with bold splashes of red covered most of the interior walls. The lack of clutter and personal effects made me uncomfortable, as if standing in a posh office building instead of a home. The police had commandeered the large kitchen island as their command center. Aaron Burns and Richard Samuels stood with 2 other homicide detectives and crime scene investigators. I stuffed my hands in my pockets and walked into the kitchen. "Hi. Sorry I'm late. How can I help?"
We haven't cleared the scene just yet. The responding deputies assumed it was a suicide and mucked it up.
Aaron ran his hand through his short, dark hair.
I'd like for you to walk out back, see if you pick up anything. Talk to the Vic's husband. We'll get you inside the house once CSI is finished."
I met his blue eyes, and a thrill of pleasure pulsed through me. Bad, Tessa, bad. I disregarded my reaction, chalking it up to leftover sex magic. Aaron and I had a brief fling that ended when Bryson came into my life. Anything more than friendship and co-workers with Detective Blue Eyes was off the table.
Tessa, are you okay?
He rested his hand on my arm.
Jesus, you're burning up.
I pulled away, forced a weak smile, and lied. "I'm a little tired, maybe catching a bug."
We'll make it quick.
Aaron frowned and set his hand on the small of my back. I tried to ignore his touch as we walked toward the back of the house. "Is it suicide? Was there a history of depression, a note?"
The husband denies there were any issues. The Vic was promoted to a swanky position at the Tourism Development Board about 2 months ago. They're recently married. No family in the area, though I understand not all of their families accepted their marriage. Nothing obvious. No psych history. No note.
Aaron held the back door open. I walked out onto the patio and stopped in my tracks. A man hung from a thick branch of an orange tree by strands of Christmas lights. Several investigators moved around the area, snapping pictures and collecting evidence. I stepped away from Aaron, dipped my chin, and closed my eyes. My spirit animal stilled as I focused on the energy around me. If Mr. Partridge's spirit lingered in this place, I could reach out to him and try to get his side of what happened. More often than not, murder victims, and those who died suddenly, hesitated before moving on to the afterlife. I opened my eyes to find Aaron and the others staring. The expressions on the tech's faces made me want to run. They thought of me as a freak, or worse, a fraud. Aaron touched my arm, drawing me back to reality. His brows rose in question. I shook my head. "I got nothing. Is the spouse nearby? I'd like to talk to him before I walk the house."
He's next door.
Aaron guided me away from the crime scene toward a gate on the far side of the yard. I hadn't expected the gate to lead to the neighbor's property, nor did I expect to find a crowd of people so close. Then again, my family and friends couldn't be quiet in church, let alone a backyard. Aaron led me toward a man sitting alone.
Mr. Adams, this is Tessa Lamar. She's the victim's advocate I told you about.
I stepped forward and offered my hand. "Do you feel up to talking?" Mr. Adams looked me over slowly, as if judging my worth by my clothing. I prepared myself for his rejection, but he took my hand and dropped his chin to his chest. The weight of his grief slammed into me the moment we touched. I'd misjudged his pain as indifference.
Thank you, but I've told the police everything I know. Gatlin wouldn't have done this to himself.
His voice caught at the mention of his husband's name.
Detective Burns and Samuels are two of the best. They'll do everything in their power to find out what happened." Mr. Adams narrowed his eyes.
"I know you. You're that psychic, right?"
I chewed my lip and nodded. People who recognized me tended to react in one of two ways. They treated me like a sideshow freak, or begged me to connect them with their dearly departed. Officially, I'm a victim's advocate. Occasionally, I'll work with the police to help solve crimes, but I don't consider myself a psychic.
"Honey, I'd employed Sherlock Holmes, Columbo, and Teresa Caputo to find out what happened."
He moved his legs and motioned for me to sit. "Thank you, Mr. Adams. This'll only take a moment." I sat and turned to face him.
"Please, call me Michael. What do you want to know?"
"Tell me about your husband. Anything you want to share is fine. It helps if I know a little about them." He drew a breath.
"He is, or is it was now?"
My chest tightened as I recalled the day I caught myself referring to Charlie in the past tense. "I believe our loved ones are never far from us. You can use the present tense if you want."
He is the most amazing man. Driven, hard-working, but loving and generous. He is the type of person who has his own gravitational pull. People are drawn to him.
I couldn't help but smile at the way Michael spoke of his husband. "What did he do for a living?"
Oh, honey, what didn't he do? He's involved in several local charities and manages a handful of actors and artists. He landed his dream job a couple of months ago, working at the CVP as cultural director. He won a huge contract last year, and they promoted him.
"Is he a performer?" The words felt awkward, but I respected his decision to use the present tense.
He could have been, but he suffered from a debilitating case of stage fright. He preferred to be behind the scenes.
Michael sighed and wiped his eyes.
"I'm sorry. This is all too much. We're newlyweds. I can't believe he's gone."
"I'm sorry for your loss. I'll give you some privacy."
"Thank you, Tessa."
"One last question." I smiled and motioned to the fence. "What's the deal with the gate? Most people want to keep their neighbors out."
"This is Gavin's house. I married the boy next door."
He chuckled under his breath before his grief took him again.
"We use it for temporary housing for visiting artists or out-of-town guests. I'll be staying here until the police finish."
The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. "Michael, would you mind if I stop by tomorrow? I need to get inside your house, but I'd like to walk through this one too. I never know where I might pick up something."
"Of course, anything you need."
He stood and pulled me into a hug. Normally, I have a no touching the clients rule. In this case, I made an exception. Something about this man drew me in. Gavin wasn't the only one with a gravitational pull. I would have loved to have met them before tragedy paid a visit. Chapter 4. My mother's car sat in the driveway beside Graham May's little pink house when I arrived. In a perfect world, I would have had time to take a shower and put on clean clothes before meeting Darlene's boyfriend. Then again, in a perfect world, my mother wouldn't have a boyfriend, and I'd have a father. When Charlie died, I'd learned that my biological mother, Achila, was full-blooded Nunnehi, the Cherokee version of a fairy. Part of me had always suspected I'd been switched at birth. However, when I imagined meeting my real parents, I'd always imagined a mother and a father. Instead, I had an elusive ghost and no dad. The scent of barbecued ribs reminded me I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I walked past the empty grill and sighed. Graham May didn't approve of tardiness, not when it came to church or dinner. Still, I lingered outside. Maddie, Bryson's chocolate lab, lifted her head and gave me a sympathetic look. I'm in big trouble, huh, girl? The dog looked at me, to the grill, and back. I might be in big trouble, but at least I'll be eating barbecue instead of kibble. I steeled my resolve and opened the screen door.
There she is.
Bryson smiled as he stood to embrace me. I pressed my face into the smoky fabric of his shirt and relaxed. Not long ago, walking into my great-grandmother's house was all I needed to feel at home. Since Bryson crashed into my life, his arms had become my safe place. Whatever distance had formed between us hadn't diminished his warmth.
You two need to get a room,
Darlene barked a cigarette-graveled laugh. Bryson kissed my forehead before he pulled out a chair for me. Thank you. Sorry I'm late. I did my best to ignore my mother and the man seated at her right.
We just said grace.
My great-grandmother patted my hand.
Now, dip me some baked beans. Careful, the dish is hot.
Yes, ma'am. I scooped beans onto her plate. When she didn't pull it back, I added a second serving. As the person holding the spoon, it became my job to fill 4 additional plates. The small task offered a welcome distraction from my mother fawning over her new guy. Tessa, this is my boyfriend, Stone. Darlene beamed at the long-haired man. May pursed her lips, unimpressed with Darlene's latest beau. Nice to meet you. I passed the potato salad.
You too. I feel like I know your soul. Darlene talks about you all the time.
He held his hand up when Aunt Dottie offered the plate of ribs.
No thanks, ma'am. I don't eat anything with a face.
May rolled her eyes toward the ceiling, and Bryson dipped his head to hide his grin. Darlene skipped the ribs, but watched as the plate emptied. Why are you late? Were you working on a murder case? Yes, ma'am. I stuffed a roll into my mouth, hoping she'd take the hint and drop the subject. You should charge by the case. It's a crying shame what they pay you. Those psychics on the TV make millions. Aunt Dottie smiled at Stone. What do you do for a living? I appreciated her efforts to turn the conversation, but Darlene watched me from across the table. I recognized the look from when she'd tried to quit smoking. Angry and desperate. She wanted those ribs as much as her body wanted nicotine. She needed a target for her frustration, and I had a bullseye on my forehead. My leg bounced under the table as I struggled to avoid Darlene's eyes. Bryson pressed his thigh against mine under the table. The contact took the edge off my nerves, enough for me to swallow my food.
A little of this, a little of that. I don't believe in capitalism. I'm more of an artist.
Stone took a bite of the collard greens and blanched.
Miss May, is there bacon in the greens?
May's chin rose.
I don't put bacon in greens.
Dottie sighed. We put salt pork in the greens. There's bacon in the green beans and potato salad. Darlene didn't tell us you were a vegetarian.
I'm a vegan.
He turned green around the edges and stood.
Where's the restroom?
You're a what?
May tossed her napkin on the table. It's through Tessa's room. Darlene shoveled a huge bite of potato salad into her mouth and stood. I'll show you. He watched her chew in horror before following to the bathroom. When Dottie moved into May's house, she took my childhood bedroom. Despite the change, we would always refer to it as mine. May shook her head and focused on her plate. Bryson and Dottie followed her lead. We ate with the knowledge we had a short window to get the meat down before Stone returned to the table. I wondered if Stone had any idea what he'd gotten himself into with my mother. She obviously hadn't warned him about dinner with a bunch of carnivores. I had to hand it to Darlene. She had diverse tastes in men. The last one she brought around worked construction and sported an impressive beer belly. May wiped sauce from her fingers. "What's a vegan?" Bryson chuckled.
He's a vegetarian who doesn't eat any dairy or eggs.
"Well, what the heck is left?" She smirked and added a few more ribs to her plate. Darlene returned to the table alone and lunged for the rib plate. She reminded me of a dog who'd stolen food from the garbage, hunched over, protecting the meat in her hand while casting worried glances over her shoulder. "Mama, just tell him you aren't a vegan. You can't start a relationship on lies." Darlene finished the rib and grabbed another. "Don't you lecture me on relationships, young lady. I'll have you know." Stone emerged from the bedroom, looking less green and more pale.
Sorry about that, folks. I'm a bit of an artist myself.
Bryson seemed to take pity on Darlene and distracted Stone while she discarded the evidence.
What medium do you prefer? I work with natural stone and wood.
Before he could reply, Darlene said, "All mediums are the same, despite what my daughter says. I watch enough of them on the TV. They all talk to ghosts and can tell the future, though if Tessa were worth her weight in salt, she'd tell us the winning lottery numbers." I sank further into my chair as the man shared a look. Dottie grinned, while May continued to gnaw on a rib bone. Stone wrapped his arms around my mom's waist and set his chin on her shoulder.
I like anything spiritual, but music and watercolors are my artistic mediums.
I softened toward him. Not many men had shown her such tenderness. "You should come to Sunday service with us. Our pastor's on fire this month." Dottie stood and cleared her plate. Stone shrugged.
I don't subscribe to Western religions, but I'll check it out. I haven't been in a church since I was 10.
May's mouth fell open. I have expected her to bless a bathtub of water and baptize the man herself. Bryson took my hand, probably anticipating a negative turn in the conversation, but May shook her head without a word. Maybe she'd picked up on his gentle nature, too. Stone kissed Darlene's cheek and sat.
You two are medicine people?
Bryson nodded. "I keep telling them they need to take out an ad on Craigslist and expand. People would love to visit a real-life medicine man and fortune teller." Darlene shot me a triumphant look. "Mama!" I shook my head, willing her not to launch into her ideas for expanding our income. Stone said,
Advertising isn't allowed, right? No, it isn't. We have our hands full as it is.
Bryson took my hand and asked Stone,
What type of music do you play? Drums in a classic rock cover band, but my passion is leading a local drumming circle. Something about sitting in nature with others, pounding out a rhythm. It's indescribable.
Bryson's grin widened.
I couldn't agree more. Dude, you and Tessa should come out one night. I can loan you some bongos.
Bryson glanced at me, then back to Stone.
Absolutely.
Sounds like fun. I nodded, though banging on bongos with Stone ranked just behind root canals on my things to look forward to list. Chapter 5. Bryson and I sat on the porch swing, letting our food digest as the crickets chirped and the bottles hanging in the spirit tree clinked together. Maddie had curled up on Dottie's chaise lounge, happily gnawing a bone. Dinner was interesting. I scooted closer. He draped his arm around my shoulder.
I liked him.
I couldn't help but smile. Stone's nice enough, but not exactly Darlene's type, besides the unemployed thing, of course. Bryson hooked his finger under my jaw and turned my face toward his.
He seems to care about her.
I met his eyes. then glanced at his lips. Maybe he'll be good for her. He seems laid back, not the screaming and pushing kind she usually goes for.
Laid back is good.
He pressed his lips to mine. My eyes drifted closed as he explored my mouth. The slow kiss stole my breath. I turned my body to him and ran my hands over his chest to speed things up, but he continued to meander around as if he had nowhere to be and nothing to do. He whispered,
I promised to take you out tonight.
I can't. I'm exhausted.
So am I.
I laughed and gave him a small shove. Why'd you offer?
Promises mean something.
I smiled until a little voice whispered from my subconscious. Is he trying to tell me something? Did I make a promise I didn't keep? He let his head fall back against the swing.
Want to talk about what happened with the women today?
I cringed, thinking about the half-naked women dancing in my grandfather's former living room, the latest in a growing list of goof-ups. Not really.
You have to be careful when invoking magic. If I didn't know better, I'd think you wove a fertility spell.
I thought back to my intentions with the words I spoke. I wanted the ladies to feel sexy, comfortable in their skin, but more so, I wanted to boost their self-confidence. If I did, it wasn't on purpose.
Whatever it was, it worked. It hit me the second I opened the door. It still lingers. You have to be sure to emulate human casting. You never know when you'll run across someone who knows the difference between Nunnehi and human magic.
He ran his fingers up my arm. I'll be more careful. Goosebumps broke out on my skin as if his touch had chilled me, but the heat in my gut flared. If he continued to tease, I'd go up in flames, literally. We could go down to the lake. I can't light anything on fire in water. He stood and took my hand, pulling me to my feet.
Let's fly. Burn off some of the leftover spell energy.
I guess it's worth a try. The weight of his rejection squashed my desire. Bryson stood, pulled me to my feet, and led me to the back of the house. Thick trees surrounded the yard and covered the remaining property. We had little chance of being caught naked here. He released my hand and pulled his shirt over his head. I stood dumbstruck at the sight of the moon playing off his muscles. I had to ask again, in case he'd misunderstood. Can we fly to the lake? I need to reconnect with you.
Tessa, bodies are fun, but sex isn't the answer.
The answer to what? His words set me on edge. I'd grown used to his condescending lectures, most of which I took as well-meaning, if poorly delivered. This hit too close to a chink in the armor, protecting my self-esteem.
You've been through a lot, babe. You need time to get control over your emotions before you can control the firebird.
Bryson frowned.
Or is the firebird fueling your emotions?
You're asking me? Considering how my anger flared, he had a point, but I'd be damned if I'd admit it.
It makes sense, considering her strength.
I didn't want to talk about the firebird. Since my spirit animal made herself known, my life had gone to hell in a paper sack. The idea of the damned bird caused my emotional instability, created a chicken-egg argument I couldn't begin to understand. Silly me, I thought being in love and wanting to get physical were positive emotions.
They are.
He drew me close.
But those aren't the only feelings running through you. You're grieving Charlie and your old life.
Again, normal. I pulled away.
Come on, Tessa. You know any therapist would tell you not to make major decisions for at least a year after losing a loved one.
A year? You want to abstain for a year? What kind of a guy refuses to have sex with his girlfriend because she's too emotional? We've already made several major decisions.
We had to act, or the elders would have forced our hands with Aaron and the medicine shop.
He folded his arms.
Can you honestly tell me you're happy with your life now?
I sighed, finding myself on the losing end of an argument. I missed Charlie every second. Working 2 jobs sucked. Worrying that I'd shift if I allowed myself to feel something left me empty and frustrated. I'd give anything to have my life back, but that was impossible. I don't want to wait a year to move forward with us.
There's nothing wrong with taking things slow.
I know. I hung my head. Nothing I could say would change a damned thing. He smiled and embraced me.
You want things settled. We'll get there in time.
Is that what I want? Settled? The words brought to mind old sneakers and unhappy marriages, not the sort of life I imagined for myself. I'd fallen in love with Bryson during a crazy time. Maybe he was right. Maybe we needed time to figure out what we had left once the crises ended. Or maybe his feelings for me had changed. No, I don't want to let him go. I don't want to wait a year or for him to treat me like a child. I needed him to fight for me as hard as I fought for us. I needed to know he loved me. You're right. Maybe we should take a break. Get to know each other as friends without the pressure to be more. He pressed his lips into a thin line.
Is that what you want?
It'll be good for me to focus on myself for now. I never asked for any of this. The spirit animal, magic, ghosts, dealing with the elders. But I'm stuck with it. I need to figure out how to be me again. Because I don't like the person I've become. I equated the changes in my life to starting a new job. Walking into a new position stunk until you climbed over the learning curve. Unfortunately, the firebird and my magic didn't have a curve. They had Mount Everest. Bryson turned his face toward the sky.
Storm is coming. If we're going to fly, we need to go.
He changed the subject so abruptly, it took me a second to catch up. I didn't want to fly, but then again, he apparently didn't care enough to continue the conversation or call my bluff. Determined not to allow him to see me cry, I turned my back and undressed. The heat inside me spread from my core to my fingertips as the firebird took over. While shifting had become second nature, the sensory differences still blew my mind. My vision sharpened, allowing me to watch a spider weaving a web at the edge of the tree line. Everything burst into color. The grass was no longer green, but brilliant shades I had no words to describe. In the daylight, the changes would be even more pronounced. I still hadn't grown accustomed to the increased peripheral vision. Instead of 180 degrees of sight, I could see all but a small blind spot directly behind my head. If I tried to focus too hard, the panoramic views disoriented me. My hearing dulled in some ways, but intensified in others. I could distinguish certain tones and pitches better in this form, but I lost deeper tenors. The effect reminded me of listening to music with no bass. The sense of home faded, and the breeze took on an entirely different meaning. I read the air current and pressure like street signs as I launched from the ground. I stretched my neck and tucked my wings, allowing the warm air current to propel me toward the heavens. Bryson followed my lead, flying a few feet behind. The sound of his wings soothed my frazzled nerves, and the feeling of belonging returned. Despite what we said or felt, our spirit animals were mated for life. I forced the thoughts away and circled back. In human form, the height would have blurred details on the ground,
but I could make out creatures moving below. I scanned the forest as squirrels and other creatures scurried from our shadows. An updraft caught my outstretched wings, and I soared until the air became thinner and cooler. Here, the sounds of the human world faded, and my mind stilled. Bryson dove toward the ground as I continued the wide circles. He blew past me, then locked his talons in mine and spiraled us to the ground. We'd performed this ritual several times. The mating dance. As exhilarating as bird foreplay was, I wanted this feeling with him in my human body. Despite my earlier words, I wanted all of him, though I didn't know how much of that desire came from the firebird. In the end, it didn't matter. He doesn't feel the same. Chapter 6. A week had passed since Bryson and I put our relationship on hold. Things between us had gone from bad to worse. We barely spoke, and when we did, the conversation revolved around work. I'd taken to going in at midday and working through the dinner hour to avoid him. My new routine had done the trick, but it wreaked havoc on my sleep schedule. I woke, alone in my apartment, to the phone ringing. I ignored it, my standard response to a phone call this early in the morning. In the back of my sleep-addled brain, I knew the ringtone meant something important, but couldn't get the neurons firing. On the second ring, I remembered that I'd said, "I shot the sheriff," as Aaron's sound. It was in bad taste, but he didn't call me when he was within earshot of the phone, so I didn't see a problem. I scowled at the clock. 5:55 qualified as the butt crack of dawn in my book. Hello?
Tessa, sorry to wake you. We have a murder. I could use your help.
Aaron spoke in hushed tones as a woman wailed in the background. I'm up. Can you text me the address? From the sound of it, he needed a victim's advocate more than a psychic. Not that it mattered. Both tasks took an emotional toll, but people tended to accept the help of a social worker type much more than a red-headed soothsayer. What's the name? Aaron sighed.
The deceased is Simon Reyes. Marty Reyes, the victim's wife, is here.
I stared at a picture of Aaron, Bryson, and me on the shelf until my guilt forced my feet to the floor. The woman's cry still echoed in my head as I pulled on a pair of khakis and official police polo. Some people handled violent deaths with quiet grace, while others went into hysterics. I hadn't found a reliable way to predict what I'd encounter at a crime scene. Age, race, sex, nor social status mattered when it came to guessing how a loved one would react to the unthinkable. I tripped over my laptop bag on the way to the door. My apartment had reached the catastrophic level of disgusting. If I didn't clean it soon, men in biohazard suits would tape off the perimeter. My thoughts drifted to Gavin and Michael's house, model home spotless. How do two people with full-time jobs keep their place so clean?
We're never home,
a male voice whispered. Considering what I did for a living, hearing voices shouldn't have come as a surprise. However, hearing voices in my apartment unnerved me. Hello? Silence. Hello? Is someone there? I closed my eyes and focused on the energy in the room. A flutter near the window drew my attention, but the spirit vanished. I went to the kitchen in search of food and caffeine. Hunger and I didn't do well together, and coffee was the best defense against wayward spirits interrupting my personal thoughts. I suspected it had something to do with my level of alertness. Then again, lack of sleep could cause my magic to go haywire, too. I stuffed a Pop-Tart into my purse and grabbed a bottle of Frappuccino from the fridge. If nothing else, the spike in blood sugar would perk me up. Inside my car, I looked up the directions to the murder scene. At this hour, the freeway wouldn't be too bad. Despite over a decade of construction, Orlando's main interstate remained a parking lot most of the day and half of the night. I flipped the radio on to keep me company on the drive. Hanging by a Moment blasted through my speakers. Odd, considering I'd set the station to NPR. I turned onto the highway and hummed along with a mouthful of toaster pastry. The familiar voice of the NPR news anchor filled the airspace, but as I pulled into the traffic lane, another song cut her off. The 80s classic, "Don't You Forget About Me," blared. "Mr. Partridge, is that you?" I half expected an audible voice to answer, but nothing happened. A car cut me off, and I overcorrected, landing on the shoulder of the highway with Frappuccino down the front of my shirt. Damn it! As I mopped up the mess, I whispered the chant Bryson taught me to quiet the spirits. "Go now from me. It is time to rest. Go now. Leave me in peace." I promised myself I'd pay Michael a visit as soon as I finished with the new case. Even if Mr. Partridge hadn't attempted to contact me, something about the case prickled my subconscious. I turned the radio off and eased back into my lane. The type of silence that left me feeling lonely accompanied me the remainder of the drive to Belle Isle. I didn't need the GPS to find the house. Several people had gathered on the sidewalk, some still wearing their pajamas. A woman stood huddled in the center of the throng. I stepped from my car and met her swollen red eyes. "Marty Reyes?" At the mention of her name, she burst into tears. "Yes." I offered her my hand. "I'm Tessa Lamar, a victim's advocate with Orange County PD. Is there somewhere quiet we can talk?" She looked toward her house. "They won't let me inside." I lowered my hand. "The police can't allow anyone inside while they conduct their investigation. Perhaps a neighbor would let us use their living room while we wait?" A young woman with 3 children weighed. "Y'all can come to my place. I have to get the kids ready for school." What kind of mother brings her children to a death scene? I smiled, praying that someone else would volunteer. The neighborhood gossips were always the first to offer their houses. "Thank you, but this sort of conversation is best left to adults." She gave me a dirty look, but took the hint. An elderly gentleman stepped forward.
"Marty, you're welcome to use my living room."
Mrs. Reyes glanced at the man and nodded. "Thank you." I offered my hand to him. "I'm Tessa Lamar with the Orange County PD." He had a firm handshake.
"Robert Shaw, retired NYPD."
Perfect. A former police officer would understand the nature of the situation and allow me the privacy I needed to question Mrs. Reyes without interruption. "Lead the way." We followed him next door. As I walked into his home, I wondered how long it had been since he'd lost his wife. Despite the pictures of his children and grandchildren on the walls and mantel, the place had an empty feeling, like the life had been sucked out.
"Why are you here? You need to go to Michael."
The voice I'd heard earlier whispered. It had to be Gavin Partridge reaching out to me. I didn't know another Michael. I glanced at Mr. Shaw to be sure he hadn't spoken. He clasped his hands behind his back in the unofficial cop stance.
I'll put some coffee on. How do you take it?
"I like a little coffee with my cream and sugar." I smiled through the unnerving sensation that Gavin Partridge stood to my right. "Black's fine. Thank you, Robert." Mrs. Reyes sank into the sofa. I sat beside her. "Do you feel up to telling me what happened?" She bowed her head. "I heard a gunshot downstairs. At first I didn't know what it was, but I had a feeling something was wrong. Simon, my husband, wasn't in bed. I called to him, but he didn't answer. Then the front door slammed." "Are you sure it was the front door?" "Yes, it has a bell on it, a Christmas decoration. I heard it jingle. Her eyes drifted over the photos on the end table. Oh my God, how am I going to get through Christmas without Simon? I'd asked myself the same question about Charlie more times than I could count. The holidays always brought such pressure to be joyful, but seldom lived up to the hype. Without the important people in your life, they just plain sucked. Losing a spouse is never easy, but this time of year makes it even more challenging. Is there family I can call for you? I skipped ahead in my usual routine. Protocol stated I should continue the line of questioning and wrap with calling a family member, but I couldn't keep my focus. Our daughter is away at school in Tallahassee. Her expression morphed from wide-eyed fear to a queasy resignation, as if she realized notifying family members would make the situation permanent. I'll call her after we are finished talking. I turned as Mr. Shaw returned to the room with our coffee. He set the steaming mugs on coasters.
I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything else. Please, make yourself at home.
Thank you. I resisted the urge to cradle the cup for comfort. Instead, I maintained an open posture and waited for Mrs. Reyes to take a sip. Do you have any questions for the detectives? She shook her head. You can call me any time if you think of any. The detectives can be hard to contact. Something brushed against the back of my hand. I smoothed my hair, resisting the urge to turn. Do you have some place to stay for a few days? She went wide-eyed again. A few days? The investigation can take time. The police need to be sure they protect the scene until they've collected all of the evidence. The OCPD has funds set aside to help with a hotel if you need financial assistance. I have friends nearby. Her lower lip trembled, and her eyes softened. She'd come a long way from the screaming woman in the background of Aaron's call. Would you like me to call your daughter? She looked at me as if she didn't understand the question. No, I'd rather she heard it from me. I pulled a card from my pocket. Please feel free to contact me if you need any assistance with housing, cleanup, or have any questions about the investigation. I may not have all the answers, but I'll work hard to get them for you. She stared at the card. Thank you. Is there anything else you need before I go? She shook her head. I sighed at my untouched coffee and stood. The urge to pay Michael Adams a visit overwhelmed me, so much so that I hadn't done my best with Mrs. Reyes. Sure, I'd covered the bases, but I hadn't given her my full attention. Chapter 7. The Reyes house buzzed with activity. I stood in the foyer looking for Aaron, but Mr. Reyes' bare feet drew my attention. He'd landed face down on the kitchen floor. A half-eaten apple and glass sat on the counter. I turned from the kitchen and walked into the family room. Unlike the house next door, the Reyes had no family pictures on the wall or mantel. The room felt sterile. I turned to a tech carrying several evidence bags. Is there a TV room or a den? He motioned toward the back of the house.
Down the hall?
Thanks. Is Detective Burns back there?
Yes, ma'am.
The text blush told me he knew who I was and had probably heard the rumors about my relationship with Aaron. When the news had broken the story of a psychic helping the police department solve a murder and rescue the victim's missing children, they also hinted that Aaron, Bryson, and I were an item, thanks, in no small part, to Darlene. Aaron and I didn't have a blush-worthy relationship, unless you counted one make-out session and a ton of flirting before Bryson staked his claim on my heart. Aaron glanced up and smiled as he slid a laptop into an evidence bag.
We're almost done here for today. How'd it go with the wife?
She's going to stay with friends in town. Is she a suspect? I hated this part. I came to the scenes to assist the family, but more often than not, the family had committed the crime. He shrugged.
Too early to tell. What does your gut say?
My gut doesn't have an opinion.
Anything else on you have an opinion?
I cringed when a couple of the crime scene investigators glanced my way. Nope.
Go ahead and do your thing.
Aaron turned back to his paperwork. Between the nervous energy from Gavin's spirit and the number of police downstairs, I decided to start on the second floor. The killer could have come upstairs while the couple slept, though unlikely. I needed a few minutes of quiet to center myself before walking each room and touching any reflective surface in hopes of seeing a vision of the murderer.
What are you doing?
Gavin's spirit said. I smiled at a tack dusting the banister for prints. My co-workers already thought I had a screw loose. No sense in proving them right by talking to an invisible friend. I pushed my thoughts and emotions down deep and focused on the job.
I know you hear me.
I entered the master bedroom and ignored the rumpled bed, the family photos, and the masculine robe tossed on the floor. People lived here, but I had to think of them as victims' families, or perps. I placed my palm against the mirror. Images of the events that took place in the room flashed through my mind from newest to oldest. Marty Reyes had told the truth. She was in bed when the gun fired.
I'm not going away until you talk to me. I need to see my husband.
I whispered, "We'll talk outside. Let me do my job."
Your job is to take me to my husband.
The investigators and the body on the floor left little room in the kitchen. I walked on the far side of the island and surveyed the space. I didn't need to know the bullet went through Simon Reyes' forehead. The blood pooling on the floor wouldn't help me have a vision. The fact his eyes remained open and seemed to follow my movements didn't help me do my job. I turned to the breakfast nook and pressed my hand to the window. Nothing. The spirit continued to yammer in my ear as I attempted to read other windows, the mirror on the baker's rack, the shiny countertop. I caught glimpses of the co-workers' disapproving expressions as I continued. My focus slipped, causing my magic to falter. "May I touch the glass?" I motioned to a half-full glass of milk on the kitchen island. "Sorry, Lamar, we haven't processed it yet." The female crime scene investigator smiled. The spirit scoffed.
How can they smile with a corpse on the floor? Have you people no respect for the dead?
I'd asked myself the same question many times until I learned to disassociate my feelings from the job. Or thought I'd learned. Whatever was going on with my emotions needed to stop. I couldn't function with a ghost and my internal noise rattling around in my head. As I made my way back to Aaron, I couldn't shake the feeling I'd let him down. I didn't get anything useful. I'll come back or check the evidence room in a few days.
Thanks, Tessa.
He tilted his head, studying me with his startling blue eyes. Once upon a time, those eyes had set the hook and reeled me in. I hated the way he could read me, as if I were a perp making up an alibi. I didn't need to say a word for Aaron to know when something was up. I should get going.
Give me 5. I'd like to speak to you.
Sure. I turned and walked outside. Storm clouds obscured the sun. The lack of actual food and caffeine weighed as heavily on me as the darkened sky. I drew a breath and forced my shoulders down from my ears. My thoughts drifted among the man haunting me, the 2 deaths, the 2 men in my life, and my growing sense of unease. I prayed that whatever Aaron needed to talk about had to do with work. He emerged from the house with a concerned expression.
Hey, thanks for waiting. Want to grab some coffee?
"Bryson's expecting me. We have a full schedule today." As much as I needed coffee, I didn't like the look in his eyes. Aaron wore cop face for 2 reasons. He was elbow deep in a tough case, or he had personal questions. Since his current cases were straightforward, I bet on the latter. He stared too long, then turned his head.
Did Mrs. Reyes mention lawyering up?
No, she's still in shock. I don't think it's crossed her mind yet.
What's going on with you and Bryson?
And here it is. I shrugged. Nothing. Why?
We went out for a beer last night. He said you two had an argument.
I wouldn't call it an argument. We agreed to... Hell, I don't know what we agreed to.
Just be friends?
I nodded, hating the way it sounded and hating how hollow I felt more. He shot me a dubious look.
You're okay with that?
It's only been a few months since Charlie died, and a lot has happened. I think it's wise to get to know each other better.
Does that mean you're available for dinner and a movie?
He dipped his chin and watched me through thick, dark lashes. I couldn't believe he asked me that. Technically, I was single, but Aaron and I worked together. While he knew Bryson and I had magic, he didn't know anything about my ability to turn into a mythical flaming bird, or the significance of my relationship with Bryson to our people. Anything more than friendship with Aaron would be like going out with a powder keg while swallowing fire. I don't think it's a good idea to date someone you work with. Aaron chuckled.
You work with Bryson?
Yes, and it's hard. I couldn't handle it if this job became awkward, too. He ran his hand down my arm.
So come to a friendly dinner and a movie with me.
Lunch and a matinee this Sunday, after church. I found myself smiling, despite the little voice inside my head telling me I'd regret this decision.
After church means lunch with me and Dottie.
Uh-huh. It also meant Bryson would be there. We'd likely miss the early movies, and I could bow out of alone time with Aaron. He scratched his head.
Deal.
See you Sunday. I fished my keys out of my purse. I'm headed over to the Partridge house.
Call it in and make sure you have officers on site before you go inside.
Will do. Is the scene cleared?
Not yet. Should be in a few days. It's looking like a suicide, but I'm willing to chalk it up to an accident. Man hanging lights falls from a ladder and accidentally hangs himself in the backyard.
He looked away and frowned. If it was suicide, why'd he wrap the lights around himself? Why didn't he tie them around his neck and be done with it? Aaron sighed as he leaned closer.
The lights may have tangled around him after he stepped off the ladder. There were signs that he struggled.
I wrapped my arms around my middle. I hate Christmas.
Me too. The holidays always bring out the crazies.
Aaron followed me to my car. I slid into the driver's seat and he leaned in. For one terrifying moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he glanced at the empty Frappuccino bottle and Pop-Tart wrapper.
Breakfast of champions.
You know it. I fastened my seatbelt. Bye, Aaron.
Drive safe.
He closed the door and walked back toward the house. I drove a couple of blocks and pulled over. My forehead hit the steering wheel. What the hell am I doing? What's Aaron doing? I didn't know if I wanted to laugh, cry, or punch something. Instead, I picked up the phone and dialed Michael Adams. Chapter 8. Michael met me in the driveway of his house. The police sticker marred the front door like a zit on picture day. It announced to the world that life wasn't as perfect as it seemed from the outside. I pulled my purse higher and plastered a smile on my face. Despite my feelings to the contrary, I didn't know this man, and I had no idea how he'd react to hearing about his dead husband's ghost. Good morning. Thanks for meeting with me. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end.
It's afternoon.
He gave me the once-over.
Do you have any idea when I might be able to get inside my house?
My still undigested breakfast churned in my stomach. I knew better than to come to a death scene unescorted. Should Michael decide to force his way inside or take something from the house, I couldn't stop him. I believe the police are almost finished. I spoke with Detective Burns this morning.
I contacted my lawyer. He warned me that the cops would try to keep me out as long as they can. He's working on a petition today.
Lawyering up. Not good. Let me see if Detective Burns is available to meet with us. If nothing else, he can escort you inside so you can gather some of your belongings.
I don't want to gather my belongings. I want to sleep in my own damn bed.
Let me see what I can do. I dialed Aaron and set up a silent prayer he'd answer his phone.
Hey, Tessa. Did you change your mind about coffee?
He sounded amused. I'm at the Partridge Adams house. Is there any chance you can come by? Mr. Adams has some questions and he'd like to return home.
Don't you have uniformed officers with you?
His voice didn't sound as smiley. I braced myself for his reaction. No, it slipped my mind.
Damn it, Tessa! I'll be there in 20.
He disconnected. I turned to Mr. Adams. Detective Burns will be here soon. Would you mind if we walked through Mr. Partridge's former residence? I'd like to see if I can get a feel for him. Sometimes it helps to be surrounded by their things.
My lawyer advised against working with you.
What happened to the man I'd met the night before? The one who would have lifted a semi-truck to get justice for his husband. I understand. Is there anything else you need from me? Funeral arrangements, notifying family, or obtaining the death certificate? The voice that had spoken to me all morning screamed in my head.
He lashes out when he's hurt. Tell him to stop being an ass and take you in my house.
I pressed my hands to my ears before I could stop myself. The voice boomed from the inside, but my instincts told me to protect my eardrums. Michael's eyes widened.
Are you okay?
Embarrassed and without a rational explanation, I nodded. Gavin Partridge wouldn't give up.
He acted like a boorish prig for weeks after Betsy died, refused to get another dog. Tell him what I said.
I decided to go for broke. Who's Betsy? Michael's eyes filled with unshed tears. Gavin told me you lashed out after she passed away. The anger you feel is completely normal, even more so when the loved one dies unexpectedly and under suspicious circumstances.
Gavin spoke to you?
The color drained from his face. Yes.
What did he say?
I swallowed hard and prepared for an explosion from the emotional man. To stop being boorish. Michael laughed loud and shrill.
That's Gavin. To hell with it. Come with me.
Mr. Adams, let's wait for Detective Burns. Your legal counsel advised you against working with me. Should you have second thoughts, I could be accused of coercing you into allowing me into Gavin's home. I stood on shaky ground any time I used my abilities in front of a victim or family member. Toss in skeptical attorneys, and things could end badly for me.
Addison will deal. He's an old friend, overly cautious and a devout atheist.
He turned and walked toward the house next door. Despite my conscience telling me to wait for Aaron, I followed a few feet behind. As I entered, the difference in decor between this house and the one Michael and Gavin shared struck me. This felt like a home, lived in and welcoming. It reminded me of something out of a Pottery Barn catalog. For the first time since I rolled out of bed, my shoulders relaxed. How had I missed the effect Gavin's spirit had on my psyche today?
As I've said, we've been using this as a guest house. Most of Gavin's personal things are at my place. The furniture and household items here are his.
Michael motioned me to the kitchen.
He loved to cook.
I wandered into the stainless steel and granite kitchen. I had no idea what half of the appliances did, but I knew enough to be impressed.
Feel free to walk around. The master bedroom and office are on this floor. There are 2 bedrooms and a den upstairs.
He met my eyes.
Is he here now?
I can feel him, but he hasn't spoken since we came inside.
Ask him what happened.
I frowned as I searched for the right words. He may not remember much about how or why right away. The fact he's still here tells me there is unfinished business. He'll go when his soul is at peace. Gavin whispered,
I was hanging lights for the party and someone came. I didn't hear him until he was behind me.
I repeated Gavin's words and added, please take what he says for what it is. It could be the truth, or it could be false memories. Until I can see it in a vision, I don't know for certain. Michael ran his hand through his hair.
Did he say who it was?
I shook my head and sank deeper into dangerous territory. My mouth had a way of running 3 yards in front of my brain. I knew better than to discuss these sort of details with a grieving man, but, once again, I'd given in to a knee-jerk reaction. My phone rang, shaking me from my thoughts. I excused myself and walked onto the patio. Hello? My mother's voice had a timbre few would call pleasant. Today, it grated my ears like a cat with its tail caught in a fan. Darlene said, Tessa Marie, you and Bryson are coming to dinner tonight at my place. I'm cooking 6:30. Don't be late. I'm out on a case, and Bryson is managing the medicine shop on his own. I'm not sure either of us can make it. You have to come. I need you to bring May and Dottie. Spending time with Darlene was bad enough, but eating her cooking ranked up there with Chinese water torture. I'll try. Do better than try. Oh, and pick up a couple of bottles of wine and some grape juice. Wine? I pinched the bridge of my nose to stave off a headache. Since when did Darlene drink wine? Right. Forget the wine and grape juice. Make it rum and get some of that pina coconut mix. Pina colada? That's it. Stone likes fruity drinks. Better pick up a blender, too. I sold mine at a garage sale. Chapter 9. Aaron arrived and assured Michael the police would clear the house as soon as possible. After the brief conversation with his dead husband, Michael had calmed down enough to listen to reason and stay clear of the backyard death scene. I had no desire to witness Gavin's death with Michael watching. Not to mention, I needed free rein to relay information to Aaron, no matter how gruesome. I wandered around the tree where Gavin died. The police had taken the Christmas lights to the station as evidence. Even the fragments of broken bulbs were missing. I walked to the pool ladder and ran my fingers over the metal handrail. Nothing happened. I had to get my head in the game. Between Gavin's constant presence, the thing with Bryson, and dinner at Darlene's, I couldn't focus. The fire in my core felt distant, as if even my spirit animal had abandoned me. The harder I reached for my power, the more alone I felt. The emptiness stole my breath.
What's wrong?
Aaron placed his hand on my shoulder. The contact caused the firebird inside me to flicker. Bryson had a similar effect, only more pronounced. Aaron's unexpected touch shouldn't have awakened my spirit animal, not unless we were making out. On a whim, I grabbed Aaron's face and focused. Heat flooded my being from my fingertips to my core. I opened my eyes to find him staring. What the heck am I doing? My cheeks flushed, and I released him. Sorry about that. I needed to ground myself. You helped me focus. dinner with my mom, the thing with Bryson, crappy breakfast.
No need to apologize.
I turned and grabbed the handrail. This time, visions exploded behind my eyes. Crime scene investigators, uniformed officers, the coroner pulling the body from the tree. I watched my horror-stricken self staring at the dangling body. The images flashed from newest to oldest. "He was murdered!" I gasped.
What did you see?
The visions were distorted because the metal isn't flat, but I saw it. A dark-haired man knocked Gavin off the ladder, then hit him on the back of the head. He wrapped the lights around him, strung him up like a piñata, and secured him to the tree.
Did you get a look at his face?
I shook my head, trying to remember how to breathe. Most of the murders I'd seen were over in a flash. This one took time. The killer had stayed until the final credits rolled. He'd enjoyed the show.
Height? Build?
Aaron led me to a deck chair. How tall was the ladder?
8 feet.
Little over 6 feet, then. He looked heavy, but width that could be distorted, too. I leaned forward. Gavin came to while he hung. It wasn't a quick death.
The coroner said he hit his head but didn't break his neck.
Aaron rubbed my back as I sat hunched over. The murderer hit him with something. A club or flashlight, maybe? I sat upright and glanced around. Did they find anything like a tire iron or mag light?
Not that I'm aware of.
Aaron frowned.
Can you try again? Maybe read the window?
I stood and gave my spinning head a moment to catch up with the change in position. The sunroom windows were closest to the tree. I pressed my palm to the glass and focused. The same images flashed through my brain from a different angle. I can't see his face. Aaron spoke, but his words were lost as the visions continued to flow. Gavin had a visitor earlier that afternoon, a blonde male. The two laughed and touched each other often. They shared more than a casual relationship. Oh no, Gavin. Really? Aaron pulled me away from the window.
What did you see?
I dropped my voice to a whisper. Gavin was dating someone else.
The perp?
No. The killer had dark hair. This guy was blonde.
Do you think they're related?
I doubt it. The blonde left really, happy.
Oh.
He shook his head.
Does the spouse have any idea?
I couldn't understand how a newlywed could cheat. Why bother getting married? If he does, he's one hell of an actor.
I need to talk to Michael Adams about this. I'll try to dig up some evidence that doesn't involve you.
He paced the pool deck as he mentally snapped more pieces into the puzzle.
You didn't get a look at the killer's face?
No, but his build is similar to Michael Adams.
Damn.
A headache blossomed behind my eyes. I needed to sit and process what I'd seen. I'm spent today. You know me. After witnessing a violent death, I'm fairly useless. His cop face softened.
You said I helped you focus?
People I care about can ground me when I'm in high-stress situations. I tried to play it off with psychobabble, but wanted to slink under a rock and hide. I had no business touching Aaron. He glanced over the yard, then back to me.
You said something about dinner with your mother?
I rolled my eyes toward heaven, my usual reaction when someone mentioned Darlene. She's cooking. Bryson and I have to drive Dottie in May.
Bryson's not around today.
That's impossible. We're booked solid. I'm heading there next.
He called and asked if I wanted to go surf fishing shortly after you left the res this morning.
Bryson never shirked his responsibilities. Something had upset him for him to cancel a day's worth of clients. Not something. Me. I'd upset him. No, he seemed fine when I left. The abandoned little girl inside me recognized this as the first step in him leaving. Darlene would go off for a day here and there, then a week or so, until finally she parked me on Charlie and Dottie's front porch with my suitcase. Bryson might have gone fishing, but by closing shop and going off without a word, he was teaching me to live without him, planning for the day he would leave for good. Sure, I'd told him I wanted to be friends, but only because I wanted him to argue. He didn't fight for me, for us. He left. I turned to Aaron. Come with me to my mom's tonight. I can't handle this alone.
Dottie and May will be there.
I dipped my chin and widened my eyes to look as pitiful as I felt. Please, I need you. Chapter 10. Grandma, ready to go? I walked further into my great-grandmother's kitchen. Any other day at this hour, I'd find her standing at the stove cooking dinner. Aunt Dottie? Maddie padded into the kitchen, wagging her tail so hard her entire back end shook. She rubbed up against my legs like an 80-pound cat, then moved on to Aaron.
Weren't they expecting you?
Aaron scratched the dog behind her ears. Yes. I shrugged and checked the living room and both bedrooms. They're not here. Aaron crouched down and retrieved a half-eaten piece of paper and the remnants of a bread wrapper from beneath the table.
It's a note. Darlene picked them up earlier.
I narrowed my eyes and pointed at the dog. What did you do? Maddie slunk into the corner with her head hung low.
She gave you an out when she ate the note. We can skip dinner with Darlene. It's been a long day and you seem out of sorts.
He reached for my hand. Maddie growled and moved to my side when he touched me. It's okay. Down, girl. I pulled away and stuck my head in the fridge to search through the recycled butter bowls and whipped topping containers. Let's stay here. May always has leftovers. I'm sure I can find something. Aaron made a kissing sound to call the dog to him, but she remained by my side. I turned with a plastic bowl in each hand and caught Aaron staring. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all.
We're both adults here. Nothing's gonna happen unless we want it to.
The way he looked at me told me that at least one of us wanted it to. I couldn't cross the line, or wouldn't. Not until I came to terms with the Bryson situation. I put the containers back in the icebox. Let's grab burgers at that place down by the station. I'd like to get a look at the murder weapon in the Partridge case if forensics is finished doing their magic. He opened his mouth to speak, but my phone interrupted. I glanced at the number and sighed. Hi, Mr. Adams. Aaron frowned and folded his arms. Michael's voice boomed through the connection.
You left without telling me. Did you find anything? Did Gavin say anything else?
I angled myself away from Aaron. I'm sorry. We had a call and had to leave abruptly. I should have let you know when we finished. Gavin didn't reach out to me again while we were there. Michael made a strange sound, half sob and half laugh.
That's Gavin, always making things harder than they have to be. Will you be back?
I'm not sure. It depends on what the detectives want me to do. In any case, I usually wait a couple of days between readings.
Thank you, Tessa. I can't begin to tell you what you did for me today. Knowing he didn't leave me on purpose.
You're welcome. I frowned, not wanting to believe this man could have killed his husband. He disconnected. I turned and met Aaron's accusing expression. I'd broken the rules, and he knew it.
What's going on with you?
I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, wondering to which of my issues he referred. Nothing. That was Mr. Adams. We didn't let him know we'd finished.
Yeah, I got that. You need to keep your distance.
He frowned.
I'm not talking about work. What's going on with you?
I couldn't go into the problems with my magic and the firebird, so I went with the obvious. I'm second-guessing breaking things off with Bryson. He shrugged, but I caught a flash of something in his eyes. Guilt? Did he say anything? I trusted Aaron. He might twist things a little to suit his needs, but he'd never outright lie to me, not if it meant he'd hurt me. And this would hurt me.
He said you two agreed to take a break. You needed time.
Aaron sighed.
He's upset, but he loves you.
So you admit to flirting with your friend's woman? I grinned, hoping to lighten the mood.
I have a bad habit of falling for people I can't have.
He motioned to the door.
Let's go. I'm starving.
I'm sorry, Aaron. Things are complicated. Bryson and I have a duty to the tribe. A duty to our race, but I couldn't tell him that. The elders had considered killing Aaron because he knew too much about Bryson and me, but we'd tricked them into putting him under our protection. I didn't know what it meant for Aaron that Bryson and I had split up.
Life is complicated.
He moved toward me, and my phone rang. I turned and put the phone to my ear. Hello? Tessa Marie, where are you? We're almost ready to sit down for dinner, my mother screeched through the connection. I'm at May's. You told me she and Dottie needed a ride to dinner, remember? Oh, plans change. I picked them up hours ago. Now, you get your fanny over here. Dinner's getting cold. Nobody likes cold fried chicken. Actually, a lot of people like cold chicken. I couldn't resist giving her a hard time. I assumed she'd picked the ladies up early to have them cook. Tessa Marie Lamar, I'm in no mood for your sass. We're sitting down in 10 minutes with or without you. Yes, ma'am. On the way. I slid the phone into my pocket. May's fried chicken at Darlene's. The ambiance is lacking, but we can't beat the food.
Sounds good.
Aaron's smile didn't reach his eyes. We spent the drive to my mother's in silence. No police dispatch, no music, no conversation. Only the heavy weight of hurt feelings and the sound of tires on the road. I wanted to fix things, but I didn't know where to start. Aaron had come on strong, while Bryson had given up. My feelings didn't seem to matter, not that I knew how I felt about anything anymore. The one thing I knew for certain was I needed to get out of the car. Stone stood in the doorway of Darlene's duplex, wearing a Nirvana t-shirt, a pair of worn-out cargo shorts, and a grin.
Glad you could make it. Where's Bryson?
I forced a smile. He's out surf fishing.
Bummer. I like that dude.
Stone glanced at Aaron, and his grin faded. Likely he knew a cop when he saw one. This is Aaron, a friend of mine. We work together. I smiled as Stone held the door for us. It came as no surprise when he disappeared down the hall. I guessed he went to make sure his bong was out of sight. About time. Where's Bryson? Darlene pursed her lips. Aaron stepped forward and offered her his hand.
He's at the beach fishing. I hope you don't mind me tagging along. If your chicken is half as good as May's, how could I resist?
May choked on her sweet tea.
Of course her chicken isn't as good as mine. She can't cook soup from a can.
Aaron flashed May a grin and bent to hug the short, round woman.
Miss May, I've missed your smile.
Right on cue, May grinned like a schoolgirl after her first kiss.
Flattering an old woman is a sin, but I'm sure God won't mind this once.
Good to see you, Aaron. Dottie stood and gave Aaron a hug, but when her eyes met mine, they were full of questions. We skipped lunch and worked late. I couldn't send him home to a TV dinner or burger from a box. I seated myself at the table and smiled at May's fried chicken and chunky mashed potatoes, as well as Dottie's award-winning green beans. If Darlene had warmed the bread, it'd be a miracle. "Did you bring the peanut coconut?" My mother narrowed her eyes. Perfect. Not only could I use a drink, but I'd set myself in her crosshairs. It slipped my mind. "No bother." Darlene set glasses of sweet tea in front of us and took her seat beside Stone. I didn't understand her response. The lack of snide comments and dirty looks concerned me on a new level. She has something up her sleeve. Stone frowned at the chicken and reached for a small plate of beige-ish cubes I assumed was tofu. May made a noise, stopping him mid-grab. "We should say grace." May took mine and Dottie's hands. "Grandma, you know Stone doesn't believe in organized religion." Darlene pressed her lips together in a not-so-patient smile. "There ain't nothing organized about saying grace." May nodded her head toward Aaron. "Please bless our food." Aaron's eyes moved from May to Darlene and then to Stone. He must have decided that May presented the greater threat because he took my hand and bowed his head.
Dear Lord, thank you for this food we're about to eat. Thank you for the loving hands which prepared it. In your name we pray. Amen.
May made eye contact with Stone, but spoke to Aaron. "In Jesus' name we pray. Jesus." Aaron nodded.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
The amendment to grace seemed to appease May and pissed Darlene off. In my book, that made it a success. When Stone excused himself to answer the door, I felt sorry for him. He had no idea what he was up against. May would have him dressing for dinner and attending Sunday school within the month. Aaron gave my hand a squeeze and leaned to whisper in my ear as my spirit animal roared to life. Bryson stood behind us, staring at our entwined fingers. Chapter 11. Aaron released my hand before I could make sense of the look on Bryson's face. Angry? No, not quite angry. Surprised? Irritated? Hurt? All of the above? I gave up and turned away. I couldn't understand my emotions, let alone his. Aunt Dottie seemed to grasp the situation and swooped in to save me. "We just finished grace. Pull up a chair. Tessa will set a place for you." My brain kicked in and I stood to get an extra plate and silverware. "What would you like to drink?"
Water's fine.
Bryson's tone was as rigid as his posture.
Did you catch any fish?
Aaron scooted our chairs down to make room.
Enough for a decent meal.
He leaned and kissed May's forehead.
I cleaned them already. Would you like them in the freezer or fridge?
May patted his hand as he sat. "I'll fry them up tomorrow." When I returned to the table, Bryson had seated himself in my spot. I set my place between the two men and handed Bryson his ice water. Scrunched in a testosterone sandwich, I had no idea what to say to break the tension in the air. Unfortunately, Darlene had no such issue. "How do you all fit in one bed?" May slapped the table. "We have better things to do with our mouths than sex talk. Dig in, the food's getting cold." "I guess when you're all stacked up, the size of the bed doesn't matter." Darlene giggled. Everyone turned to her with the same look of impatience. Everyone except Stone, who appeared to be considering the logistics of a threesome. I didn't dare open my mouth for fear of landing a size 8 sandal in it. Instead, I passed the potatoes. The sooner we ate and washed the dishes, the sooner I could get out of here. To my surprise, my mother let the conversation end and focused on her chicken. I wondered why Stone didn't protest. Maybe she'd finally come clean about her lack of concern for God's creatures. For his part, he kept his eyes low and avoided looking at the growing piles of bones on our plates. Darlene waited until the end of the meal to knock her knife against her glass. "Everyone, Stone and I have an announcement." I drew breath and waited to hear the poor fool had asked my mother to marry him. She'd married men in less time, but considering their differences in age, religion, social consciousness, and most everything else, I hadn't expected her to rope him in this quick. Stone took a swig of tea and announced,
Darlene and I are expecting a baby.
"Mama, you're almost 45. Maybe you missed your period because of menopause." I blurted the words before I thought about the repercussions. Darlene glanced at Stone, who seemed confused. 38 is not almost 45, Tessa." "Bull crap. So what? She had me at 13?
She went to a doctor to confirm it. That's why she's eating meat. The doctor said she needed extra protein.
Stone smiled at Darlene. If she had bothered to visit a doctor, I'd bet my right arm the obstetrician hadn't mentioned anything about needing extra protein. Before I spoke again, Bryson pinched my thigh. I ground my teeth to keep from yelping. I'd have a bruise by morning.
Congratulations.
Bryson lifted his glass. May and Dottie exchanged a look, but raised their glasses without a word. The traitors. "Congratulations, Mama." The words tasted like ash. Her one saving grace was that she'd not had more children after me. No one deserved to grow up the way I did, abandoned and unloved by their mother. I wondered what sort of father Stone would be. Would they raise my little brother or sister to be a miniature hippie vegan? Could Darlene raise a child, or would she ship it off? May and Dottie were too old to care for a baby, which left me. "Thanks, everyone." She leaned in and kissed Stone on the mouth. I stood, toppling my chair in the process. "I have to go. I forgot to turn in my paperwork at the station." Aaron righted my chair.
I should get going too. Congratulations, and thank you for dinner.
May and Dottie called my name, but I hit the front door in a blind panic. I had to get out of there before I said something even more awful. Darlene's voice followed me outside. "She's used to being an only child. She's just jealous." I stood in the driveway dumbstruck. I'd forgotten where I parked. This was it. The thing that would break me. I'd lost my grandfather, learned I wasn't human, been shot twice, and nearly died at the hands of a deranged conjurer, but Darlene getting knocked up would end me. Aaron jangled his keys and motioned to his car.
You came with me, remember?
I slid into his front seat and stared at the house. Bryson hadn't come outside. He had to know how hard the news had hit me, yet he hadn't bothered to get out of his chair.
Are you okay?
Aaron started the car. He just sat there.
Did you come outside so he'd follow?
I didn't appreciate the humor in his tone. No, I came outside because I was about to lose it, and I didn't want to upset an 87-year-old woman and a mother-to-be.
It's pretty screwed up.
He turned onto the main road and picked up speed. That's Darlene. It's sad. I don't think she knows who she is. She takes on the personality of whatever man she happens to be dating. Aaron glanced over.
Do you know who you are?
My mouth fell open. I wanted to punch him in his perfect jaw, but when I considered the question, I realized he had a point. Who am I? Everything I knew about myself had changed.
I'm sorry. That was out of line.
No, don't apologize. You're right. I have no clue who I am anymore.
I don't think that's accurate. You're good at your job.
You have these amazing abilities and a couple of knuckleheads who would lay down their lives for you.
Aaron squeezed my hand. One knucklehead. The other is dumping me a little more with each passing minute. I glanced out the window, relieved to be close to home at the end of this day. He sighed.
Technically, you dumped him. Bryson's doing what he thinks is right for you. He's giving you time to figure out what you want.
Okay, then what are you doing? He grinned.
I'm making sure you know I'm still an option.
But you and Bryson are friends. Doesn't that break the guy code? He pulled into the driveway.
I wish we'd met years before Bryson came along.
I couldn't stand the pain in his eyes. My throat tightened as the truth spilled from my mouth. I care about him, about both of you.
What if I were willing to share?
I sat back in my seat and digested his words. I don't think Bryson would go for that. He nodded and stared out the windshield.
And you?
I'm not sure I understand. Do you care so much for me that you're willing to share me with another guy? Or do you care so little it wouldn't bother you?
I care too much.
Aaron cupped my cheek and turned my face toward his.
I've been in love with you since we met at the coffee shop.
My nerves got the better of me. I had to break the tension before I ended up in a padded room. It was the crutches, wasn't it? Damned sexy crutches.
Damned sexy.
He leaned across the console and kissed me. Chapter 12. Aaron dropped me off at my apartment. Part of me wanted to drag him upstairs, but the sane part knew I'd regret it. As soon as I closed the door, the stress of the day changed from nervous energy to exhaustion. So much happening in one day boggled my mind. One of the perks of living alone was I could make a mess, and no one cared. I left my shoes by the door. My shirt landed on the arm of the couch. My bra hit the floor outside my bedroom, pants near the bathroom, and panties outside the shower. I turned the water to a hair past scalding and stood under the spray. The tension in my muscles washed away, but the memories bored deeper into my brain. I needed to turn off my thoughts and shut down. A couple of drinks would do the trick, but that would involve going out. Meditation did nothing for me, other than producing a detailed to-do list. The memory of Aaron's kiss, and the idea of being the creamy white center in an Aaron Bryson sandwich made my thighs tremble. The second benefit to living alone was not having to worry about someone walking in on you while you were doing something naughty. And damn it, I needed naughty. I pulled the shower head down and flipped the spray to pulse. With my back pressed against the wall, I guided the stream to the right spot and closed my eyes. My imagination took over from there. Bryson's broad chest pressing against mine, Aaron's hard body moving against my back, lips, hands, tongues, limbs entwined. I gave myself over to the fantasy. The curtain ripped open, and I dropped the hand shower, sending water spraying in all directions. A large male jumped back from the assault as I struggled to cover myself. In my effort to escape certain death, I slipped and landed on my butt in the tub.
Damn it, Tessa!
Bryson scowled and reached in to turn off the water. What are you doing here? I pulled my knees to my chest and wrapped my arms around my calves. I couldn't look him in the eye, or anywhere else for that matter. This day couldn't end soon enough.
I was worried about you. I saw the trail of clothes and heard you.
Please, just go. My wounded pride and sore bottom were nothing compared to the anger welling inside me. Bryson had come uninvited into my apartment, assumed I was getting busy with Aaron, and barged into my bathroom.
Let me help you up.
He offered his hand. I'm fine. I turned my head toward the wall.
You're not fine. You're crying.
He wrapped a towel around my back and shoulders.
Can you stand?
Hateful responses danced around in my head, but I kept them to myself. I pulled the towel around my chest and eased to my feet. My tailbone throbbed, but it'd be a cold day in hell before I admitted that to Brasson.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you.
No, you meant to catch me with Aaron. He flinched, but put his hand on the small of my back and the other on my arm to help me step from the tub.
Can we talk?
It's been a long day. I worked 2 cases while you were off fishing. Then the bullshit tonight with Darlene. I'm not up for another lecture. Just go and leave me what's left of my dignity.
Are you finished?
His jaw set into a hard line. I nodded. Bryson pulled me against him and crushed my lips with his until I had to struggle for breath. I pushed against his chest and tried to turn my head, but I would have had more luck pushing a concrete wall out of the way. Nothing made sense. Why had he come here tonight? Had he really thought I was in the shower with Aaron? Why do this now? His grip on me tightened until I cried out, "You're hurting me."
I'd never hurt you.
He tugged the towel free and leaned in to kiss me again. This time slower, but as hard as the first. I pulled back and met his eyes. His expression reminded me of an animal stalking its prey. The firebird stretched her wings, and my body exploded in a rush of heat. Smoke rose from the ends of my hair. I'm burning. Bryson scooped me into his arms and stepped into the shower. He set me on my feet, put the hand shower back in the holder, and turned on the spigot. Warm water flowed over my back as he drew me against him. I pressed my face into his wet t-shirt and sighed. Is this ever going to work between us?
In time.
He ran his hand down my bare back.
But we can never be just friends.
I lifted his shirt and nuzzled against his chest. My spirit animal flared to life again, but rather than set me ablaze, she pushed against the barrier between us, as if trying to force me to shift. I ignored her and fumbled with Brasson's belt.
What are you doing?
He cupped the back of my head as I ran my tongue down his chest. Seducing my mate. I prayed he wouldn't stop me, or that I wouldn't burst into flames before any seducing happened. Take these off. Brasson hesitated and stepped back.
I'm sorry. I promised myself I wouldn't do this.
My world crashed around me. At that moment, I felt more vulnerable than I had when he caught me playing with the hand shower. He'd started it this time, yet he refused to finish it. Questioning him would seem like begging and only amplify my humiliation. My eyes stung, but I refused to cry. I needed him to leave, or maybe I wanted to hurt him. I kissed Aaron tonight. Bryson didn't react, though I knew he heard me. I smiled and went in for the kill. You don't want to know what I was thinking about when you barged in. Pain etched his face as he turned and stepped out of the tub. A coward at heart, I stayed in the shower until I heard the front door close. Chapter 13. Aaron canceled lunch on Sunday, and I faked sick to avoid a run-in with Darlene at church. Over a week had passed since I'd seen Aaron, and I was beginning to think he avoided me at the station. I wouldn't blame him if he never spoke to me again after I used our kiss to hurt Bryson. I'd spent 40 hours working in the same house as Bryson without talking about anything personal. Michael Adams called every day at noon. Every call started with a hopeful voice and ended with whispered apologies for bothering me. By Friday, I wanted to come out of my skin. Our clients noticed the difference in the atmosphere as soon as they came through the door. Some commented on the tension, while others offered sympathetic smiles or comments about working with spouses. Even the dog steered clear of the two of us. We weren't married or even dating at the moment. Working with a man who perfected the art of indifference hurt on an entirely new level. How can he act so normal when I can barely hold myself together? Mrs. Matthews, one of the ladies from the weird sex ritual, came in without an appointment. I hardly recognized her. The transformation rivaled those on daytime talk shows. New hair, new clothes, new glow. She met my eyes and flashed a smile that'd bring an 80-year-old gay preacher to his knees. Mrs. Matthews? You look beautiful. Did you want Bryson or me today? I glanced down at my wrinkled t-shirt and worn-out jeans. I looked like something the cat dragged in, ate, and threw up. I need to see you. It'll only take a minute. She glanced toward my office door. Sure, come on back. I smiled and ushered Mrs. Matthews into the room. What can I do for you? She grabbed my hands. Tessa, I just had to stop by and say thank you. I don't know what sort of magic you did to us the other night, but I feel like a new woman. I cringed behind my smile. I had no clue what I'd done and doubted I could do it again. You certainly look like a new woman. I've had more sex in the last 2 weeks than I have in the past 10 years. I've lost 12 pounds and my wrinkles have smoothed out. I owe it all to you. Thank you. I studied her face. She hadn't exaggerated the improvements to her skin. She glowed. Even her hair seemed shinier. The sex could have contributed to the weight loss and radiance, but I suspected the magic had caused the changes. You're welcome. Mrs. Matthews leaned close and lowered her voice. The other women from the circle have had the same thing happen. People are stopping us and asking what face cream we're using. We didn't tell anyone about your magic, but could you do another circle? Not for us, but for some of our friends? My head spun. I couldn't remember the exact words I'd used. My chances of redoing the spell were slim. Then it occurred to me, if all the women from that night had turned into sex kittens, why hadn't I? Maybe I'd given them my mojo? I'm afraid that was a once-in-a-great-while spell. The moon and planets have to be aligned just right. Her eyes widened. I see. Well, next time everything lines up, call us. I'll bake a cake. We can have a potluck before we dance naked. I'll keep an eye on the planets. I gave her a quick hug. Thanks for letting me know how it turned out. She squeezed me until I thought my ribs would snap, then left in a flurry of laughter and expensive perfume. I called my last client into the office, but my attention strayed. The woman complained of a sore back and headaches, not surprising with 5 young children. It struck me as sad that I identified more with this downtrodden young mother than I did with the vibrant sexagenarian who had left moments before. What happened to me? I stood and pulled down a mason jar filled with a particular type of mushroom and placed a chunk in a brown paper bag. Make a tea with this at bedtime. Use a half teaspoon of grated mushroom with 8 ounces of boiling water. Let it sit until it's cool enough to drink. It'll ease your muscle pain and help you sleep. Thank you, Miss Tessa. She held on to the package as if it were a life preserver. You're welcome. Come see me on Monday if it doesn't help. I stood and opened the door. Oh, and be careful. It has aphrodisiacal properties. What? She looked from me to the bag. It might make you feel spunky in bed. Another baby won't help your back pain. Oh, thank you. No, I don't suppose it would. She blushed and hurried out the front door. Bryson came out of the kitchen with a steaming cup of God knows what that smelled like a cross between old cheese and dirty socks. He looked past me to his office, as if debating where to go. "Don't worry, I'm done for the day." I sounded as tired and cranky as I felt.
Take your time.
He sipped his tea.
Was that Betty Matthews in here earlier?
Take my time? Take my time leaving the house that belongs to my family? My frazzled nerves sparked like cut electrical wire. Yes. He frowned.
I saw Mrs. Jones at the store yesterday. She looked 10 years younger. What exactly did you say during that spell?
I don't remember, but it didn't hurt anyone. Mrs. Matthews was walking on air.
Tessa, you know there's a cost for everything, especially magic.
Oh, boy, here comes the lecture. Thanks, it's late and I have to go. I pushed past him and went into my office for my purse. I turned the phone off silent and scrolled through my messages, hoping he'd take the hint. Bryson stood in the doorway watching me.
Can we talk?
There's nothing to say.
I disagree.
He set his mug on the shelf and folded his arms, blocking my exit. It's been a long week. Can we do this another time? He opened his mouth to speak, but stopped when my cell phone rang. It's Aaron. The muscles on the sides of his jaws tensed.
Answer it.
Hi, Aaron. I kept my eyes on Bryson, gauging his reaction.
I'm working a triple murder. The victims' families are here. Can you come? Our other advocate is out sick.
The other advocate? Since I'd started working with the OCPD, Aaron had called me in on his cases. Now he called me as a last resort? I glared at Bryson. He had said something to Aaron. Why else would he avoid me? Sure. Text me the address.
Get here as soon as you can and keep everyone out of the condo.
He hung up before I could ask any questions. I shook my head at Bryson. Did you have words with Aaron?
I did.
His expression hardened. You had no right. It's affecting my job. I hurried to the closet and pulled out a spare uniform shirt and khakis.
And him kissing you didn't affect your work here?
The police department pays me in actual money. Bryson's expression hardened. I sighed and motioned for the door. I have to change. He turned his back, but stayed in the room.
Will you call me when you're done tonight?
I pulled the polo over my head and shimmied out of my jeans. It's going to be late. He turned and closed the distance between us.
You can't avoid this forever. Sooner or later, we are going to have an adult conversation. The longer we wait, the harder it'll be.
Chapter 14. My foot alternated between crushing the gas pedal and slamming the brakes on the drive to downtown Orlando. I tightened my grip on the wheel. Who does Bryson think he is? The argument was between us. He had no right taking it to Aaron. My GPS couldn't keep up with my anger. The high-rise apartment complex appeared on my right, and I jerked the car into the drive. The garage attendant instructed me to park on the top floor with the other police vehicles. I imagined they didn't want the other residents inconvenienced by something as trivial as a triple homicide. Once inside the lobby, a doorman headed me off before I could reach the elevators. His sour expression told me he'd had one heck of a day.
Miss, you have to check in before I can allow you upstairs.
I'm Tessa Lamar, victims advocate with the Orange County Police Department. I'm looking for a Tiffany Mercier. Her mother was killed last night.
You must keep your voice down.
The man took me by the arm and led me to a hallway.
The families are in the boardroom. This way.
While I didn't appreciate him putting his hands on me, I understood he was doing his job by keeping the murders quiet. He led me down the hall and into a meeting room. Not one, but 7 shell-shocked faces looked up at me from the table.
This is Tina Lamar with the police department.
He turned to go. Tessa Lamar, I called as he shut the door. I turned back to the room full of grieving family and realized I had no idea what had happened upstairs, only that 3 people were murdered. Detective Burns called me here to speak with you. I'm a victim's advocate. Do you know what happened to my mother?
Who did this? How did someone get into the apartment? This place is like Fort Knox.
When can we go upstairs? They continued to bombard me with questions without giving me a chance to respond. I waited until the assault slowed before I spoke. I don't have any details about the investigation. However, I can write down your questions and try to get answers. They stared, as if I had landed a spaceship on the table. I pulled a notebook from my bag and wrote down their questions. Bit by bit, I began to understand the situation. The women shared an apartment? Tiffany Mercier, the person who had discovered the bodies, hadn't said anything since I'd arrived. She moved her chair closer to mine. They sang opera together all over the world. They were retired, but performed at special events around Orlando. Did they sing at Epcot last year for the Food and Wine Fest? I recalled a trio of older women singing in the French Pavilion. Yes, they performed at Epcot every year. They were scheduled to sing at this year's Christmas extravaganza for the president. I'd heard something about Orlando winning the bid for the event. The city had gone up against Las Vegas and Boston for the right to host the annual celebration. Would you like for me to contact the organizers to let them know what has happened? Tiffany nodded. I glanced at the others in the room. When no one objected, I made myself a note to follow up with the Christmas people. Please stay here while I go upstairs and speak with the detectives. The doorman watched as I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 30th floor. I could only imagine what the rent cost in a place like this, and, judging from the business suits and designer dresses, it was out of my price range. The doors opened to a crowd. Excuse me. I edged my way through the wall of people. A resident noticed the logo on my polo and shouted, "What's going on?" Once they identified me as someone with the police department, my chances of getting through the hall decreased exponentially. I don't have any details. Please excuse me. Detective Samuels, Aaron's partner, spotted me.
All right, people, let Miss Lamar through. There's nothing to see here. Go back to your apartments. Someone will speak with each of you soon.
Samuels threw his arm around my shoulder and guided me through the throng of people to a secured area outside the apartment.
How are you doing, Red?
I'm breathing. Does that count for anything? He glanced at the condo door.
Lately, it counts for a lot. What can I help you with?
I need to speak to Aaron. His grimace told me all I needed to know. Aaron didn't want to see me. The family has a lot of questions. Someone needs to talk to them.
That's why you're here.
Samuels gave my shoulder a playful squeeze. Give me the basics. A smile crossed his face so quickly I thought I might have imagined it.
I'll give you the basics on the case if you give me the basics on what's up Aaron's ass. He's been off his game for 2 weeks now. My guess is it has something to do with you.
Deal? I considered how much to share with Samuels. Aaron made a play for me. His expression changed from friendly to cop serious.
And
we kissed. Bryson and I are having issues. I wanted to piss him off, so like an idiot, I told him about the kiss. He exhaled air between his teeth and ran his hand over his head.
You know Aaron and Bryson have become friends.
I hung my head. I feel awful about it.
As you should. But Aaron's playing with fire and he knows it.
Samuels winked. He knew about my firebird and enjoyed teasing me.
He shouldn't have poached on another man's land. The boy's always been a horn dog.
The need to defend Aaron rose up in me. Aaron didn't do anything wrong. Samuels tilted his head. The way he studied my reactions made me blush from the tips of my ears to my chest. I wanted to duck and run, but the crowd still blocked the hall. Put in a good word for me with Aaron, will you?
Of course.
I had no doubt he'd tell Aaron what I'd said, along with some heavy embellishments. Your turn.
I'm a married man.
Samuels chuckled.
The case? Oh, right. 3 dead females, ages in the mid to late 60s, GSWs to the head, all 3 found in their beds. My guess is the perp used a suppressor. Clean entry through the balcony door. Looks like a pro.
Sounds like an execution to me. I wrapped my arms around my middle. Why would someone want to kill 3 opera singers?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
Can I walk the apartment?
No can do. It's strictly need to know.
Samuels glanced over his shoulder.
Word came down from the top to keep this one locked up tight.
Chapter 15. I relayed the cause of death to the family members and handed each of them my card. Usually, I'd ask some questions about the deceased lives to help me contact the spirits, but with the investigation locked down, I doubted anyone would ask me to use my unique skills to assist in the case. I hit a drive-thru on my way home. Bryson's car wasn't in the parking lot when I pulled in. Relieved, and a little disappointed, I took my briefcase and sack of dinner to my second-story apartment. The place felt empty. I flipped on the late news for noise and sat at my desk. A burger in one hand and mouse in the other, I looked up the victims. Adele Mercier, born in Paris, performed as part of a trio of opera singers. From the long list of links, it appeared she had a lengthy career. I clicked on a link to YouTube and watched a video of the women performing on an ornate stage. A glob of ketchup landed on the last of my semi-clean uniform shirts. I dashed to the bathroom to rinse it off in hopes of avoiding a full-scale trip to the laundry room. As I scrubbed the stain, the news anchor prattled on about construction on the I-4 corridor, and videos of the victims played on my computer. A soprano voice rang out, accompanied by 2 others, singing "Oh, Holy Night." The beauty of the song stole my breath. I walked to my desk, as if drawn by an invisible string to the computer monitor. 3 women wearing red dresses stood before an elaborate Christmas display. I leaned closer and paused the video. In the background, a banner read, "3 French hens." The voice I'd heard in my car filled my head.
3 French hens, 2 turtle doves, and a partridge in a pear tree.
Gavin? I turned a slow circle, expecting to see the man's spirit in my living room. My phone rang, sending my heart into palpitations. I had to get a grip on myself. "Hi, Graham."
Tessa Marie, are you feeling better?
Feeling better? Oh, right. Yes, ma'am.
I assumed the reason I didn't see you all week is that you were still sick. It must have been a bad bug to keep you out of church 2 Sundays.
Oh, boy. Sarcasm laced May's words, which only happened when something ticked her off. "I'm feeling better. I was busy this week at the medicine shop."
It is right next door. I saw your car there from sunup to well past sundown.
"I'm sorry, Grandma. I should have checked in on you and Dottie. I can come by tomorrow. Do you need anything?" I hung my head. I'd allowed myself to get so wrapped up in boy drama that I'd ignored the 2 people in this world who would always love me.
I'd like for you to call your momma. She's upset, and it isn't good for the child she's carrying.
"Graham, I can't deal with her right now." I clicked pause on the computer. The last thing I intended to do was eat crow for my mother's sake. I'd rather have a tea party with the devil than call Darlene.
Young lady, I don't care what you think you can deal with. The Lord doesn't give us more than we can handle. He gave you Darlene, and now a little baby brother or sister.
The Lord didn't give me Darlene, Charlie did. He switched her dead baby with me, his daughter's child, so I'd have a shot at a normal life. In my mind, this was the one and only mistake he'd made in his long life. Yes, ma'am.
Good girl. I'll see you Sunday morning, 9:15 sharp. You need to go to Sunday school in the service.
I'll be there. I wanted to facepalm, but feared she'd know and come after me with a switch. I love you, Graham.
Love you too, sweet girl.
I drew every ounce of goodness that remained in my soul and dialed Darlene's number.
Well, 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 if it isn't Miss High and Mighty, I have nothing to say to you, young lady.
I rested my palm on my forehead and sighed. I'm sorry I ran out on dinner. It was rude.
Damn straight it was rude.
You hurt Stone's feelings. I rolled my eyes. Please tell him I apologize. I was coming down with something. She laughed, loud and shrill.
A case of the green-eyed monster? Seriously, Tessa?
You could be happy for me and Stone. It wouldn't kill you, you know.
I can't believe I raised such a spoiled, selfish child.
I stopped listening after the first few words. I'd heard the tirade before, and I'd hear it again. I put my hand over the phone and went to answer a knock at the door. Bryson raised a brow when I put the cell back to my ear and motioned for him to come inside. He stood staring. I glanced down and realized I'd answered the door in my bra. My uniform shirt still hung over the bathroom sink. I hot-footed it to my bedroom and closed the door. Mama, I'm sorry about my reaction, but I have to go. Bryson is here. She continued to complain as I disconnected. I grabbed a t-shirt from the sorta clean pile, slid it over my head, and went to face Bryson. Excuse the mess. I haven't had time to clean up. I stuffed the half-eaten burger and ice-cold fries back into their bag and laid it on top of the overfull garbage can.
We need to talk.
Oh, right. Our adult conversation. I motioned to the couch and plopped down in an adjacent chair. I hated that he was right. My efforts to avoid this had created more problems than they had solved. He caught me at a good time. I was too tired to fight.
Buck called. The elders want to speak to us.
Buck, the head of the local Cherokee tribe, had tried to force Bryson and me into marriage and threatened to kill Aaron for knowing too many of our secrets. I'd known Buck since I was a child, but he'd played dirty after Charlie died. I didn't trust him and never would. Why? Bryson sighed.
You know how these things work. He won't tell us anything until the meeting.
Have you heard any gossip? Is something going on in the tribe? I chewed my thumbnail. This sounded ominous, but Bryson had a way of making lunch plans sound serious. I racked my brain for a reason the elders would summon us and came up with only one explanation. Our breakup? He shook his head.
A few people asked if things were all right between us. Otherwise, it's been business as usual.
Things aren't great between us, but that is none of Buck Oldham's business. The look on his face put the fear of God in me. Right? Bryson stood.
Does tomorrow afternoon work for you?
I don't have a hot date, if that's what you're implying. I regretted the words as soon as I spoke. It wasn't like me to lash out at people, but my pain kept falling out of my mouth. I'm sorry. I don't know what's gotten into me lately. Bryson didn't react to my smart-assed comment or my apology.
Do you still have clothes at the tribal house?
He stood 3 feet away and I'd never felt so lonely. I do, but I don't want to fly. I'll meet you there. Text me the time once everything is confirmed.
We should show our strength and solidarity.
So we should lie?
Good night, Tessa.
He walked out and closed the door behind him. Why can't I just be nice? I could have ended this with honesty and an apology 2 weeks ago.